This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 66. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak, brought to you in conjunction with WorldFamousComics.com. I'm Brian Deemer.
I'm Kevin Moyer.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Jamie D.
I'm Peter Rios.
We are sexy bitches, yeah!
Welcome to the show. Peter, you did all the homework on this one, so you want to tell people what's coming?
Well, today we bring you an interview with publisher of Image Comics, Erik Larsen. We already recorded the interview, so what I'm going to do real quick is about a week and a half ago, he has an article at comicbookresources.com called One Fan's Opinion, and he put out an open letter that pretty much set a few people on fire. So I'm just going to read a part of it so you know what we're talking about in the interview. All right, it says, an open letter to comic book creators everywhere. Oh, by the way, I should say there is some language in here, so cover your ears. Is that all you got? Really? Because if it is, that's pretty fucking sad. Look what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby contributed to the comic book field. The Hulk, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Thor, and a mess of incredible heroes and villains. Jack tossed in Captain America, New Gods, Devil Dinosaur, Commandy, the Dingbats of Danger Street, and dozens of others on his own. Steve Ditko, aided by others at times, I'll grant you, gave us the modern Blue Beetle, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, the Creeper, Speedball, Shade the Changing Man, and all of Spider-Man's cool villains. Other creators have brought us Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the list goes on. And you've given us what? You've contributed what exactly? A few pretty pictures, some fill-in issues, a cool cover or two, an impressive run on a title which you didn't create? That's it? That's your legacy? If you died tomorrow, you'd be fine with that? That's pathetic. What have you done which is really yours? What characters will you leave behind? What can you point to as being something near and dear to your heart? What work are you most proud of? Now, I'm not saying that Savage Dragon is the greatest creation in the history of contemporary pictorial literature, but at least it's something I did. It's something where I can say I did this run on my book, and it was all me and nobody else, and it's something which I own. It's all mine. And I understand the desire to clutch on to the security of a guaranteed page rate, and I understand the attraction of working on characters that you grew up with. But at what point are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop sucking on the corporate tit? When are you going to gasp, take a risk? Do you think the guy working for McDonald's really has a better chance for success than the guy opening up his own restaurant? Sure, McDonald's employee 12876 is getting paid a regular paycheck. Sure, the guy going out on his own is taking a real risk. Thousands of restaurants go belly up every year, and there's no guarantee of success. But shouldn't there be more to life than slapping together somebody else's hamburgers? Are you really going to feel as though you've lived a full life having spent it churning out more Big Macs? Better to have loved and lost than never loved at all. What's the matter? Chicken? Or do you really have nothing to say? And it goes on and on for another 2 pages. If you want to find it, it's on comicbookresources.com, One Fan's Opinion. It's the Thursday, September 29th, 2005. He has it listed as issue number 8. So you can check out the full article. It goes on and on, like I said. So, without further ado, here we go with an interview with Erik Larsen.
Hello, Erik.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the show.
Cool.
I'm here with Kevin, Shane, Jamie, and Peter, and we're very happy to have you with us.
All right.
Hi, Erik.
Well, I will remember none of your names nor call you by any of them.
That's fine.
So it'll all be like, hey, you, bub.
You'll
yeah,
right
the guy over there, the one on the left. So I have no idea.
I answered to hey, you, so.
All right.
The first question we always ask everyone we talk to is, when did you first start reading comics?
I don't remember.
It's been that long, huh?
Well, what happened was my dad read comics when he was a kid, so I grew up with his comics in the house, and so it really was a situation where I don't remember a time when there wasn't comics. I remember probably the first time I ever spent money on my own money on a comic was an issue of the Hulk, like Hulk 156. But that was by no means the first comic book I ever read. It was just something that caught my eye at one point.
Cool.
And that issue, that was Herb Trimp?
Herb Trimpy. Happy Herbie.
Happy Herbie. And you're a big fan of his work, right?
I certainly was at that point. He later turned into something I wasn't quite so taken with, but that's neither here nor there.
Cool.
But at that point, that was the guy. He was like, wow, there's no other artist for me. And I would sit there and slavishly try to imitate his line and stuff like that. I was just like, oh, if only I could be this cool.
Were you drawing from a very early age?
Yeah, I don't remember not drawing.
Where did eventually? How did you get into actually creating comics?
Again, that kind of just came from me reading comics and always drawing and stuff like that. I drew a lot as a little kid, and so there were always pictures of just stuff that I was working on and different things that interested me. At some point, I decided I was going to make comics kind of just for my own enjoyment, and that was like 4th grade, 3rd grade, something like that.
Wow.
And then I just kind of used those same characters, and they evolved over time, and eventually I was doing stuff professionally, but it was a very kind of natural, gradual progression from being a fan to eventually, publishing my own fanzine with a couple other guys who were interested in doing funny books, and then to, doing this stuff professionally and getting huge, thick dollar bills for doing it.
That's always a bonus, huh?
Yeah.
When you were growing up, were you a Marvel guy or a DC guy?
I was a Marvel guy until Marvel went to $0.25 and DC was still 20 cents.
So 5 for $1
I could get 5 of these for the price of 4. Maybe I should check some of these out. And I did. And then but it was never a situation where I was like, okay, these are way better. But at that point, Jack Kirby was at DC, and so it was like, this guy's pretty good, So I think I'll follow him around a little bit, and so that kind of worked for me.
You're in a unique position now, being the publisher of Image for the past it's a year and 7 months now, right?
Yeah, something like that.
How has the industry changed from when you were getting into professional comics to now? Is it harder, easier? I mean, obviously, like I said, you're in a position.
Is it harder to break in?
Yeah.
I don't know that it's ever
easy.
I don't know that it's ever hard if you're good. If you're really talented and really unusually good, people are like, yeah, we totally want you to do this book. We need good people on this stuff, and that's kind of what that's all about.
I guess that makes sense. If you see a hot artist, that you're going to hire him.
Yeah, but all of these guys, they got kind of the same goal to an extent, in that they're trying to sell comic books, and if you can help them do that, yeah, they're all about that. They want to sell some comic books.
So, as a lifelong comic fan, are you enjoying your role as head of Image?
To an extent.
Boy, you have to think about that, huh?
It's also a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Because when you have the ability to say no, sometimes you gotta.
And that's not always fun.
I can just look and see these young, bright, hopeful faces, and people who they just want to tell their own story, and they just want to do good comics, and they're so incapable of it. And they're coming to us and pitching this stuff that's just, I'm sorry, nobody's ever going to want this. and you had to be the guy who breaks it to them, and it's just not a pleasant thing.
We saw you in Baltimore, down at Baltimore Comic-Con. While I was standing in line, you were reviewing somebody's portfolio.
That's the worst job
I
ever.
was just going to say, I have to imagine that's got to be kind of not a fun thing all the time.
No, you're pretty much just breaking people's hearts, and it's awful. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
But on the flip side, I mean, if they go away and they take that criticism and they make themselves better, I mean, it really is.
Yeah, there's a couple guys who have actually done that and come back and said, "Yeah, years later, you told me I was useless," and I was like, "Well, I think years later you kind of were." So good for getting your act together.
I think that's true of any great artist. They got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't have hired me. I wouldn't. I would just be like, "Wow, you need to cook on the back burner a little bit longer there, Bob."
So I guess that was one of the advantages of being a founder of the company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually I would have hired me, but when I started out, it was like, wow, that's no good at all. Who you trying to kid?
What was your first major published work?
Define major.
Well, I guess like Marvel or DC.
Okay. Because I've been working steadily for a few years by the time I got that kind of stuff.
All right, well then what was your first published work then? Let's put it simple.
The very first published thing I did was for a black and white comic called Megaton. And I did like 4 issues of that, and that was the first time I got paid for doing this. And then from there I went and I did stuff for a comic company called AC, and I did an awful comic called Sentinels of Justice. While I was doing that, I met Jim Shooter at the Chicago Comic Book Convention, and I've been showing him my stuff for years. And it was at that show that he gave me a shot at doing basically an inventory job. And that inventory job eventually showed up as an issue of Thor, but by the time it did, it was a couple years old. It wasn't brand new stuff. So once I had done that, that gave me like the cool samples to show around. Everything else is like, well, I don't even know who that dude is. I don't know if you're drawing him right or if you made his nose too big. But once you're drawing Thor and the Hulk and stuff like that, people go, oh, well, I know what this guy's supposed to look like, and that's okay. So I got then just based on those samples that led to me doing the DNA Agents. While I was doing the DNA Agents, I was offered an issue of Amazing Spider-Man that I did fairly early on. And then I did just some various stuff over at DC Comics. I did a Secret Origin of Nightwing, and then that led to doing some kind of Teen Titans stuff. I did 1 issue Teen Titans, a couple issues of Teen Titans Spotlight, and then my regular gig that I got there eventually after doing fill-ins for the better part of a year was the Doom Patrol, which was my first real regular gig.
What was it like working under Jim Shooter in those years that eventually he would be ousted?
For me, it was fine because there wasn't really. I didn't work there for very long. It was I just did that one kind of inventory stuff, and he treated me great. I had no problems with him at all. We got along famously, and really by the time I was back at Marvel doing any kind of regular thing, he was out of the picture. I'm not even sure who was in the picture actually, because I was mostly dealing with the editor who was directly above me rather than the guy who's above him. So it's like on Spider-Man, I was dealing with Jim Salacrip. On Marvel Comics Presents, I was dealing with Terry Cavanaugh. On the Punisher, I was dealing with Carl Potts. So it was really those were the connections that I had.
Did you? I mean, everybody pretty much knows the history of Image. There's plenty of articles and places they can go to find out. We're not going to drill you for that because you're probably so sick of talking about that.
And it's a good thing because I don't recall. I was all liquored up during that time.
With all those Savage Dragon groupies, you know.
Yeah.
Finheads.
Yeah, all those comic book groupies. Shiver.
But I gotta ask though, the backlash that you guys received, because everybody felt that. I don't know what they felt. Do you think it was just that people were jealous of the money that you guys just happened to make, and
Well, I think a big part of it was people going, these guys are making some decent bank doing this stuff, and they're just not that good, and so in their minds there's this real inequity of the whole situation, which was like, well, I'm whoever, I'm talented as all hell, and yet these guys are doing real well for themselves, and I'm not. What happened?
Right. I mean, what I find interesting is that after a year or so, the Image line got creators like Alan Moore and Frank Miller and Dave Sim and Grant Morrison and all these. Neil Gaiman came over to do work and books and stories, and it just seemed weird that those that were screaming the loudest weren't trying to also maybe swim in the pool,
I don't know. I think a lot of people in this industry are just big kids. I would include myself in there, and a lot of kids don't really think long term. They just react to something. And it's like, oh, this sucks. And then it's like, oh, that guy could potentially be giving me some of that money. Damn. That might not have been the best move.
Yeah, I mean, you got Mike Grell came over and did some work. You got Jerry Ordway came over and did work.
There's a pretty much anybody who's anybody came over and did something, with like 2 exceptions or something.
Right. It wasn't like you were being exclusive. I mean,
no, we weren't being exclusive. There were, there were people who were like, we shouldn't probably let this guy in just because he's a jerk. And it's like, all right, well, we can live without this guy. That's all right.
In the last 10 years, the company's reputation has really changed from that of one that produces fluff to that of fostering the greatest people in the world of independence, and so that's quite a transformation.
I'd like to take responsibility for all that, but I really can't. So.
Hey, I got to ask you a fun question. When I saw you at Baltimore, I noticed that you hold your pencil in a very unusual way. Is there a story behind that?
No.
Actually, I thought you were.
I'm sorry. I wish there were. It really is a situation where I, as a small kid, picked up a pencil, and it felt comfortable holding it that way. And nobody could get me to hold it the proper way, because I'm like, this is working for me. And somehow or other, my teachers didn't notice what I was doing or whatever. By the time anybody cared to look up, it was kind of too late. And they all kind of were like, well, I don't know, doesn't seem to be breaking anything.
I was taken aback.
Whatever, let the kid draw or write or whatever the heck he's trying to do here.
When I first looked down, I thought, maybe he'd broken a finger or something, and then I looked for a little longer and went, no, looks normal, so there you go.
From my angle, when I'm looking down on it, it doesn't look that weird. But whenever I'm see a picture of it, or somebody did this QuickTime thing where they're showing me drawing something, I was like, that just looks fucked up.
Actually, what I thought Brian was going to ask you is he noticed you oogling his wife when I came up to pitch you. I don't know. You probably don't even remember meeting me because you were talking to or watching her.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there for the babes.
There you go.
I think it was pretty funny because your comment was because we told you about the show, and your comment was something to the effect of you'd get a lot more attention about the show if you pitched it with her along or something like that. So.
I'm really hopeless. I shouldn't be allowed to leave the house.
Oh no, just about everybody that went up to her, that's the same reaction they got. So
one of the things we have to talk about, either just to talk about it or to get it out of the way, is the reaction to the one fan's opinion article that you wrote 2 weeks back. And
I'll tell you what the reaction I have received personally. Nothing. I've got
I believe it.
A lot of enthusiastic support from a lot of different creators, but in terms of creators themselves who were offended by it, zero. Not a single person has responded to me. They might post something on their blog or say something to somebody else or whatever, but nobody had the stones to come up to me. And when I call these guys pussies, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Whatever.
You know what? I read the article when it came out, and I didn't react. Now, of course, I'm not in the industry, but
I think most people would look at that and go, well, who's he talking to?
Right.
And
if you're not one of those,
they would read it and they go, well, it seems like he's talking to people who've been doing this a while.
Right.
And I think what some people like to do is to take a whole of something and go, well, let me find a person who should be offended at this, and let me be offended for them because they're not going to react to it. And it's like, well, that's just retarded. That's like taking sentences out of a big long spiel and then go, I'm going to take this out of context and put it over here and then isolate it on its own. He's saying, whatever, and it's not really a fair critique of the piece to say he's saying to all creators who've been in the business 2 minutes or 30 years, what the hell's wrong with you? Why don't you create something of your own? When are you going to show people what you're capable of? I'm personally, I would like to see what a lot of these guys who've been doing this stuff for a lot of years, who've just been kind of doing other people's stuff, I'm curious to know if they've got anything in there. I'd like to see it. I'm interested.
Take a risk.
Take a risk. Try something out. Whatever. You don't have to do something big or long or extensive or anything like that, but it's like, if you can do something that's, something short, hey, whatever, that's good. Get it done.
One of the examples you used was John Romita Jr. doing his Gray Area, I believe it's called, his creator-owned miniseries, and it didn't. I mean, it's gorgeous to look at. It's not something that set the charts on fire, but at least
it didn't set the world on fire. But he tried something, and the thing about trying anything is, sometimes it does well, and sometimes it doesn't do quite so well. I think it's a fine story. It's not superheroes, and it's not probably what some people were expecting from John, and it was kind of a bold thing to do on his own. He did quite well on it financially. It sold fairly well, so I don't think he really had much in the way of complaints about that. But it didn't knock the world on its ear in terms of sales. But it did fine, and it's just good for him for trying out something. And here's a guy who's got something that he wants to do that isn't the same as a lot of other stuff that other people have done. Frank Miller stepped away from doing Daredevil and eventually worked himself to doing Sin City. That's pretty different kind of material than what he was doing, elsewhere. But it's taking some kind of a risk and trying some things out. Sometimes it works out great. Sometimes it doesn't work out great. But what are you if you don't try?
I think
it's kind of a shame that there were guys who, spent their entire careers doing other people's stuff. Again, to use, used Herb Trimpe as an example earlier on as somebody whose work I admired. He never really did anything that he could go, this is my guy. He did like a World War II character called the Phantom Eagle, and I think he appeared in maybe a story or maybe a issue or two, and that's kind of it. And it's like, well, that's kind of a shame that this guy certainly has a passion for a lot of different things, and not just comic books, but he was an avid pilot, and he's an active human being. He goes out there and actually does things, and he doesn't just sit at the computer all day long and read people's blogs. This is a guy who's out there doing stuff, and he's got he was in a war, and he's got all sorts of life experiences that he could be drawing upon, and he's drawing other people's stuff. And it's like, I would be curious in seeing what he's got there, what else he's got to show. Just curiosity, if nothing else. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and he's going to make a mint. Some people do, and some people don't. Some people spend a better part of their careers trying to make their own stuff work. I think a big part of Wally Wood's life was trying to find an avenue for his own stuff and the stuff that he really wanted to do. And often he was coming against obstacles and not succeeding. But I got to give the guy credit for making that attempt. A lot of writers have this story they want to tell, and it's this fire that's burning in their belly. It's like, I just want to get this thing out there in some form, somehow. And those are the kinds of people whose stories I'm interested in reading, not the guy who's just sitting there going, I don't know, what if, I got a pretty cool idea. The Scorpions can attack J. Jonah Jameson and want to get revenge. It's like, well, we've read that about 900 times before. It's the same story again and again and again.
What do you say to the guy, though, who honestly gets joy out of working with characters that, he loved as a kid or something?
Well, more power to him. I mean, if that's what he's got and that's all he's got going on, that's all you got to say is, look, this is all I want to do. It's like, that's fine. I have no problem with you doing what you want to do if that's it. I might question that. I might think, geez, really? That's it? That's all you got, huh? But I can't say, yeah, don't do that. That's really a terrible thing to do. A lot of people, that is their goal. They hope to one day, I watched Days of Our Lives all the time when I was a kid, and now I'm in Days of Our Lives, and that's all I ever wanted to do was be part of that. It's like, you have attained your goal. Congratulations. As a kid, I wanted to draw Marvel Comics. That was a goal for me. It was something I always wanted to do, and then I got there and I got to do it. But I also knew that there was stuff I wanted to do beyond Marvel Comics and beyond DC Comics and just do my own stuff in addition.
Hey, Eric, this is Jamie. Do you think the climate now is easier for somebody like you to do something like that, whereas Herb was working,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely is. So. Yeah. I mean, you can't fault any of these guys for living and existing in the eras in which they existed. Wally, I think probably more than a lot of guys, went out and found a place that he would go to Europe and he would go to other places in the world and just try and find some avenue for doing something. But it's a lot of work and it's a lot of hustling for stuff that may not necessarily pay off. Right now we're in an era where finally there are publishers that are publishing stuff where you can do your own thing and your own character and all of this stuff, and these barriers have been broken down after years of people being beat up about it, and even places that weren't offering that sort of thing are offering a better deal than they had in years. DC is actually giving people equity and stuff, if not flat-out ownership in some cases. And that's terrific. More power to him. But my question at this point is, okay, so where's this stuff? We're supposed to have this big gush of creativity after all of these wars have been won and all these barriers have been broken down. So where's the stuff? Is it just Hellboy? That's it? That's all anybody's got? And not to take anything away from that, because damn it, that's cool. But anybody else got anything?
I think the instant reaction is everybody expects new things to automatically be popular and make money, and if, expectations from readers are sometimes just not real.
Well, they're not real from readers, and they're not real from retailers, and it becomes a situation where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And for a long time, a number of years, that's what Image was kind of looked at as, well, this is a place where people are going to come, they're going to do 2 issues, and then the books won't be getting the sales that they wanted, and then those things are going to go away. And then, so why should we buy these things to begin with? Because they're just going to die. And so it becomes this just kind of catch-22 where they wouldn't order the books because they knew they were going to die, and then the books died because nobody ordered the books. And luckily, there's been a spat here recently of guys who've come over and done books at Image and have done really, really well and are continuing to build an audience, month after month after month. And, you get guys like Robert Kirkman who's doing The Walking Dead. And it's like The Walking Dead, the latest issue, sales came in. It's like that's 3 times the sales on issue 20 than there were on issue 1. And it's like, that ain't bad. It's, that's a book that's really growing and it's showing some real success. And, he's continued to be having success, and he's being rewarded for that by both readers and retailers who are reading and enjoying the book and being able to count on them, being able to go, you know what, I think that there's a good chance that this story, which has started, is going to pay off, and we're going to get to see the conclusion of it. I get to see where this story is going. And there's, similar things with other creators coming on here and doing other books. The Luna Brothers going and doing Ultra did very well. It was a book that had a hook, and it had a cool look to it, and a nice design, and decent stories, and fabulous art. And, it did very well and continued to do very well, and now the trade's doing great. And then they've gone and taken that and done a new book called Girls, and that book is similarly doing real well and growing month by month.
This is Shane in Baltimore. I saw them at the Image stand and saw their Ultra book, and I just picked that up at the shop today because I kept looking at it, and I'm dying to read it. It just looks good.
It does look good, and it is good. And it's not something where you would go, yeah, this reads like everything else that I've ever read before. It just has its own voice, and that's something that I really appreciate that those guys are bringing is something that has a unique voice. You don't read it and go, yeah, this reads the same as a fill-in on Iron Man. It has something else.
Eric, concerning the spike in numbers on Walking Dead, as we told Robert Kirkman at Baltimore, we take full responsibility for that because last month or 2 months ago we made it our Book of the Month club, and we had lots of fans reading it and writing in and telling us how much they loved it. So we'd like to think we contributed a little.
Well, I expect a similar push when Savage Dragon comes back in January because
Yeah, we can work something out.
Hey, there's something to be said about you being the only Image original that is still doing his own book. I mean, you know.
I would hope so, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen any evidence to support that theory. But
Well, it's something that's quoted a lot.
Yeah.
You know, if people say, you know, love him or hate him, you got to respect him for doing the same book for years and years and years and getting out in a regular schedule and all that jazz. So.
yeah, well, yeah, that regular schedule thing's kind of gone by the wayside. But yeah, okay, I'll take the rest.
I think that's understandable. You're still producing probably more work than Joe Quesada is these days.
Joe, what's wrong with you, man? Well, I don't want to say anything about Joe.
Okay.
You know, I love him like a brother.
Can I ask you your opinion? Because I read all your your archives of one fan's opinion, and we talk about this a lot on the show. Slabbing books.
I'm again it.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Any particular reason why?
I think where it has legitimate value is when somebody is selling something on eBay and you just want confirmation that what they're saying is near mint actually is near mint. If you're just buying something completely sight unseen, it's nice to be able to go, when I get this thing, it's verifiable that this really is the condition this guy is claiming it to be. Other than that, I think it is a complete waste of time. It's enormously expensive. It makes the books unreadable. You can't read them, and I'm all about reading the books. And you know, I go into these conventions and I'm looking for stuff. I look for trying to fill in collections of my own. And it's like, you know, there's a book up on your wall over there, and it costs 3 times the amount that it should cost. And you've made it unreadable because I can't even open the thing. You know, I bought a unslabbed version of Whiz #1. And it's like, you know, thank God there's still copies out there that exist for people like me who just want to be able to buy something and have it and open it and look through it and experience that.
What did that cost you? Too much.
Yeah, my wife doesn't listen to this show, right?
The same as my wife. She doesn't either.
That was a lot. That was like the most expensive comic I've ever bought by a wide margin.
Did you stick it in a bag, or is it just like out in the coffee table?
It's in a bag. I mean, it was in one to begin with, but yeah. That's crazy.
Another popular discussion that we have on the show is where do you see in the next decade or two the comics industry going as far as growth and new readers and, you know, formats and dollar amounts and all that kind of jazz?
I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know where it's going for sure. It certainly seems as though people are going much more towards doing books as opposed to doing comics as individual, you know, the funny books go. That seems that people are kind of working towards doing the trades. But you can't just have the trade because there needs to be an inexpensive way for people to be able to get a sample of something to know that they want to buy the trade in the first place. So there needs to be a little bit of that. I certainly wish that we could do something akin to what goes on in Japan, where they've got weekly comics that are coming out and they're, you know, 500 pages long, and you can read a whole mess of stuff in one of those and then go, you know what, I like this story here, I'm going to buy the trade of that. You know, essentially what we get in terms of manga is we're getting the Japanese trades. We don't really get, or we don't get much of their regular comics, because their regular comics are these weekly things, and they're printed on toilet paper, and you can buy them in vending machines. I mean, it's crazy where comics are available in Japan. They are absolutely everywhere. They are at every newsstand. They are in vending machines. They are in just every convenience store and every street corner. I mean, you can't walk 100 feet without tripping over somebody who's got comics that are for sale, and we do not have that here at all. But I'm encouraged to see that kind of growth in the industry. That there are people out there who are being able to find another audience that are interested in reading, because we didn't think that teenage girls would want to read comic books, and nobody was ever really making any kind of a serious effort to try and appeal to that kind of an audience. And it turns out there not only is that audience, but they're voracious readers, and they're willing to support thousands and thousands of comics. I was like, well, cool. So who else are we missing out there that we just aren't getting and aren't being able to find a way of servicing? And I think there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of places where these things could be and aren't. I'm trying to break down some of those and get it so that this stuff just becomes more and more available. I would like it so that if you go and see a Fantastic Four movie, that when you go into the theater, that there are Fantastic Four comics available at that theater as you go and put down your money to watch that movie, so that when you come out, you might go, you know what? I think I'm going to spend a couple bucks and get some of this stuff too. And those sorts of things and those sorts of books available in those kinds of places will only help the comic book stores. And those guys get a little insecure at times, and I don't like to hear that sort of thing. But if we can just let people know that you like this issue of Spudman, and you want to get a back issue of that, you're not going to be able to find that at your local newsstand, because all he's able to carry is the new stuff. So if you want to be able to get the stuff you're missing, you got to seek out these comic book stores, and those guys are going to flourish because of that.
Well, as Eric, as publisher of Image, have you tried to spearhead anything like getting some of Image's books into newsstands and stuff like that?
We do what we can. It's tough, and it's a big difficult hurdle to go to, and there have been many a company that have gone out of business by deciding they want to have their books on the newsstand, because it's a returnable market, and they do return them, and in some cases they return them in big numbers. The problem we got with comics right now is that they're enormously expensive, and they don't get as much kind of content as they probably should in order to justify the amount of money that people are spending on it. Spend $3 on a comic book that you can read in 10 minutes. It's like, I could spend that $3 on doing a lot of other things, and if I buy a book, I'm going to be sitting there reading that book all day long and well into the night. If I go and watch a movie, I'm going to be spending a couple hours there. If I go and rent a movie, it's going to cost me a couple bucks, and I'll be able to get the same sort of thing I would be able to get from going and seeing a movie. So it's become this thing where comic books at one point were a very inexpensive and portable kind of entertainment. You could get a stack of comics and give them to the kids in the back seat and go for a trip, and that would keep them quiet for a while. And now you can't really do that sort of thing anymore, because a stack of comics is really expensive, and you might as well just have a TV in the back of your car and just have the kids watching Teletubbies or whatever.
So have Image publish a monthly black and white compendia on really cheap paper.
I think that would be cool. I think that would be neat.
Because I was personally, I was a big fan of when CrossGen did that, because and it wasn't on cheap paper and it was color and everything, but it was still a cheaper way, and I got a whole bunch in 1 month, and I had a whole cross section of all the different things that they published, and it was fun. And I was begging at that point for Marvel and DC and anybody to do the same thing, because what fun it would be to read a whole bunch of comics all in one book like that.
Yeah, it gets a lot more complicated with us, just because there's things where we've got more freedom than a lot of people, and we've also got a lot more restrictions than other people at the same time because we don't own anything. So when you start going, yeah, we're going to put all of our comics into one book, and one guy's going, wait a minute, my sales on my regular comic are, 40,000. The sales of the other guy who's in the same comic are 4,000. Clearly more people are going to be buying this book because of my stuff. How come I'm not getting 10 times the money that he is from the same book? And it's like, well, you're filling up the same amount of pages. It's like, well, that's not necessarily good enough answer for the guy whose book is selling 40,000.
I can buy that argument.
And it gets real complicated when you're a Marvel or DC. It's like, look, all the money's coming to us. What do we care? We don't really. It doesn't make that much difference to them whether they're making their money from Captain Marvel or Batman. It's just all DC money. It's all going to the same place.
Erik, with Image now, you talk about promoting people to come out and do their creative projects and self-publish and do their own works. Somebody going to Image, do that throughout that process. Can you kind of give some information what's behind that process to get your own book done? Like if somebody comes with you with an idea or a concept?
Yeah, generally they don't come to me with just an idea.
Uh-huh.
Most often what we're telling them to do is we're it's sort of like a co-op where we're giving people the opportunity to come here and do their thing under a shared umbrella. So, that the company is got all the pieces in place so that you don't have to be talking to the printer yourself, and that you don't have to be talking to the various people who need to shuffle these things through. You don't need to be calling them up and trying to get a better price on printing your comics than the next guy. We take care of a lot of that stuff that needs to be done. But people will generally come to us, and they're fairly well figured out. They know who their artist is that you're going to want to work with, and they will do just a pitch, generally speaking, that's got 5-6 pages of sequential artwork showing us this is who our characters are, and this is what this book is going to look like. This is what the cover might look like. This is what the logo might look like, and then from there, we just get these people working, essentially, and shuffle them on through the system and get those books on the stands as quickly as we can. We take a flat fee off of everything that we publish, and it's the same flat fee for a guy who's selling 40,000 as a guy who's selling 4,000. And the reason for that is the guy who's selling more books, it's the same amount of work for us as it is for the guy who's selling the small amount of books, and that there's no reason that the guy who's selling more books should be penalized because he's successful. It's like it's not his fault. That's kind of how it works. It's fairly simple. It's all back end sort of thing because we don't pay people page rates because this is them doing their own thing. This is like you going and saying, okay, I'm going to open up my own restaurant across the street. Okay, now who's going to be paying me by the hour? Anybody? And it's like, no, you're your own boss. You don't get it, right? This is you. You're doing this yourself. Oh, myself. Okay. Well, some people don't really grasp what that means. Like, well, what that means is, when this stuff does real well, you do real well, and you can do way better doing this stuff on your own here than you could be doing in many other places. And when you do not so well, the opposite.
So with somebody coming to you with a concept and they have a pitch for you, they also should have like a letterer and a colorist and all that, all in line.
They should have at least an artist, and if not a letterer, then at least a temporary letterer, so that you could show me on a page where you're going to put the balloons. Because people who are just starting on, who've never done this before, don't grasp the very basics of storytelling. The very basics of, I'm going from this panel to this panel, and you're not reading the balloons in the right order. That just look, you got to put the first balloon has to be up higher than the second balloon, and it should be probably more towards the left. That sort of thing. Not all starting artists know to leave room for the dialogue, or where to leave room for the dialogue, or how to work with a writer, and various other things. So that step is just to make sure that these guys know what the heck they're doing. And if it's somebody who is a very established professional and clearly does know what they're doing. John Romita Jr. does not have to show us that he knows how to do 5 sequential pages. We understand. We've seen him do it before, and we're relatively confident he can pull it off again. But if it's somebody else who's fresh and new and never done anything, we got to kind of have some assurance that these guys aren't going to be, complete screw-ups.
Erik, when you said about getting comics into the movie theaters, for example, when big movies come out, I think that's a great idea, and it's a shame it doesn't happen more, because I think all these marketing people license the hell out of everything to every Tom, Dick, and Harry company to make anything from a piece of candy to just any toy just to get out there, and it's a real shame that they don't think that next step to connect point A, which is the movie, to point B, the comic that already existed.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that could be done, and I can't necessarily do them with my own guy. I can't necessarily get people to do things with, say, Dragon. But one of the ideas that I've kind of vocally, I've said time and time again is, a lot of people get the Sunday newspaper. When they get it home, it's crammed full of all sorts of ads for stuff that they pull them out and then they throw them away. What if, say, the Toys R Us section had 5 pages of comics every week, in addition to being their catalog? One, their catalog wouldn't get thrown away. It would be kept and collected by kids. It would drive newspaper sales instead of being something that is hurting, whatever, that's not even noticed. People would be following it from month to month. So you would be getting something where it's a regular, ongoing thing, and it would just essentially be an ad for comic books. Spider-Man. It could be Spider-Man story. 5 pages of Spider-Man every week. It's in, and what does Toys R Us lose? They lose some paper. They lose some territory. What do they gain? They've got a catalog now that is being kept by way more people than were ever keeping those catalogs before. And when you've got something like that that's being kept, you're going to get repeat viewers, people who are going to look at that catalog again and again and again and again.
That's an interesting concept. That's very interesting.
I'd renew my subscription to the Sunday paper if that were the case.
And if it was an original story and it's only available in the newspaper, oh, God, I guess I kind of want, and it's by somebody good instead of somebody crappy. It's like, oh, damn it, what am I going to do? Frank Miller's doing a Spider-Man story. I can't not get the newspaper. I got to get the newspaper now.
Well, just start doing 5 pages of Spider-Man a week.
The
grand return of Erik Larsen to Amazing Spider-Man.
Whatever. But you know what I'm saying? That's the kind of thinking which I think a lot of guys have got to start doing. And it's just going, how can we think outside of the box kind of thing? It's like you've got Playboy magazine that comes out on a monthly basis. How can we turn that into a comic book? How can we turn Field and Stream into a comic book? It's already selling to a lot of people. Would they buy it if there was 6 pages of a continuing adventure of some fisherman guy? I mean, there's manga of guys who are fishing for 20 pages of fishing, and people seriously get into that stuff. They're showing how they're tying lures, or there are comics over there of people making sushi. You tell me that very descriptive, well-drawn comic that's showing people how to make sushi in a cooking magazine isn't going to be something that people will want to see. Oh, you're giving me how-to, and you're showing it's just like watching Yan Can cook, only here it is in front of me, and I don't have to freeze frame. It's like so now Field and Stream is a comic book, and now Playboy is a comic book, and now Better Homes and Gardens is a comic book, and suddenly you look around and you go, everybody's reading comic books now. What happened? They used to just be buying these magazines, and now everybody's participating in this, and everybody's now got this kind of visual language that's become part of their vernacular, and that's how this stuff spreads. I think the manga thing is just a great example of somebody who just found a niche and went and did something. Guys doing Captain Underpants. That's a comic book for kids, for little kids. And it's not all comic book. It's interactive, but there are pages in there which definitely are comic book, and that thing doesn't sell in the comic book stores, and it doesn't sell in a lot of places. But a little kid, he wants to read it.
I'm a big fan of Kevin McGuire's artwork, and he did a comic strip in either Playboy, I think it was Penthouse that he did it, and aside from the obvious motivation for that that magazine, just the fact that he was doing a strip motivates me to want to try and find them at some point and see what his art was like in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Adam Hughes did some stuff in some of those that was just amazingly beautiful. It's like, oh my god.
There was a fan frenzy when Kevin Smith did something in a newspaper. Bendis had something in a newspaper. I mean, there's articles about comics now in newspapers that everybody goes out and buys because they want their complete collection.
Yeah.
So I
mean, there'll be every now and then there'll be an issue of TV Guide. They'll suddenly go, and here's an X-Men story, and it's like, I got to go buy TV Guide now.
I mean, I used to do it when I was younger too. I used to get the newspaper because Mike Grell got on to doing the Tarzan strip,
Sure.
And I was collecting all those. I was getting every paper and cutting them out and keeping them all. I love Mike Grell stuff.
Yeah, and it's like, well, where else can I get these things?
Exactly.
And if those could be in the newspaper, and then those are collected on a semi-regular basis, and the people who read in the newspaper knew about that.
Do you remember when Atari used to put out the Atari Force comics? They used to have little mini comics in all of their video games. I mean, video game is a huge market nowadays, so I wonder why it's not in that.
It's there. Somebody's just got to do it. Yeah. And yet they're not. And that's how you grow the industry, is doing that sort of thing, where you can just find some different way of approaching this stuff and make it work. And it can be done. But it's not an easy thing, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, and somebody's really got to be thinking about it and figuring out ways of making this work.
It takes that first step. Somebody has to make that first step. And
one last thing. How has since you're now the publisher of Image for the past, like we said, year and eight months or whatever it is, what's been like something that's just really surprised you, and do you have anything that's coming out in the future that you want people to pay attention to? As the company itself,
I'm always hesitant to say, because there's always people who are like, how come you didn't say me?
It's like a bunch of crybabies over there.
You don't like to play favorites with your children, sort of thing. But there's always internally stuff that people are all worked up about wanting to do. I'm surprised. Godland is building, but I'm surprised it's not a bigger book than it is, because I think it's a really good book. And it's just like, it's doing okay, but it's not taking over the world, and I think it should be. Some of the surprises are negative, and which is too bad. I had high hopes for Amazing Joy Buzzards, and it's like, that book just doesn't quite do, the kind of numbers that it really should do in order to be real successful. I think it's a great book, and it's just a lot of fun to read. But for whatever reason, people are resistant to it or whatever. I don't think I really get surprised too much, although I'm more pleased, I guess, than surprised. That you've got Invincible, which when it started out looked like it might not make it to issue 12, is suddenly going, okay, now we're at 25, and that it's building and the sales are getting better month in, month out. Those are the sorts of things that please me, and at the same time, it's frustrating that there were other books that came out at that same period of time which could have been doing that same kind of thing. Fire Breather, I thought, was a great book, and with beautiful art and good stories, and it was a good solid book, and the people who were working on it didn't stick on it, and so it's not there to make that climb. It just kind of went away, and they pop back in and do it every now and then. But it's like, if you guys had just been able to maintain and just hang in there, I think you really could have had something. And that's kind of frustration. And some guys are real. It's just interesting to be doing this because different people react different ways to different things. There's things that I've said that I've inadvertently pissed people off, believe it or not. And I'm a pretty easygoing guy, and I've had people come up to me and say some pretty obnoxious things that I can just, you just, when you're with your buddies or something, you just, you're pitching them shit or whatever, and you don't even think. If you just took this out of context and put it into cold type and put it in the middle of an article, somebody's really going to get offended at it, because to me it's like I'm just pitching people crap or whatever. Part of the reason that one's fan's opinion was that got some reaction, was written the way it was to get some reaction, and that's so the people who are out there yelling and screaming and carrying on, thanks guys, because you reacted exactly the way I thought you would, which got the attention that I thought it would get, and you made it all work, so I can't feel too bad about any of that at all.
The industry needs a little shake-up every now and then.
I think it kind of does. I think it kind of gets fat and complacent and just sits around, and it needs people who are out there kind of pushing the boundaries and trying out different things and shaking things up and getting some attention.
Erik, I'm going to put you on the spot. I ordered your She-Dragon book and pre-ordered that through my retailer. And
you fool!
What's going on with it? I still haven't seen it. What's happening?
I'm still waiting on some of that artwork. I don't get it.
Really? You're still waiting on artwork from that yet?
It was a situation where I thought we would both really get our act together, and then we both didn't. He wanted me to do layouts for him, which I was like, oh boy, that's just that. I mean, it's essentially drawing the book and then having him draw the book on top of me drawing the book, and so essentially what I done is I gave him like, okay, well here's 6 pages of layouts, get started, and then he got working on those, and then I got involved with other stuff, and then it was like, keep going, I need more, and it's like, okay, well here's a couple more, and I kept doing them all over this long period of time, and I never actually sat down and wrote out a plot. Always a mistake. I had sort of a general idea of you get your points of, okay, I want to get this, and this accomplished, and that's getting your ducks in a row and you get what's called the spine of the story figured out, which is what I had in my brain, and hadn't been put down on paper. And so, eventually I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't just lay out 3 pages and then expect to be able to have that same train of thought to be able to finish that up. So eventually, after laying out 26 pages, I just wrote out the plot for the rest of it, and then it hasn't been coming that quickly since I did that. I've kind of been waiting on him a little bit here, so it's going to be late. There's no two ways about it. He's not done. Same thing with Savage Dragon 122. It's been a situation where, as I've been working on it, and it's been going real well, and I'm real pleased with the way the stuff looks. But time has kind of caught up with me, and at this point, I think if I just started shipping issues, that retailers would be like, "Could you resolicit maybe, or what?" So we're doing that, as we're actually resoliciting it, so it will be something of a big deal. I would hope that, hey, Savage Dragon is back after being off the stands here for the last 6, 7, 8 months or something. That it'd be something of an event. Hey, look, he's doing this stuff again. Cool.
Still not as bad as Kevin Smith's record, so you're fine.
No. Which isn't to say Kevin isn't a good guy, because he is, damn it. But it's tough. It's tough sometimes.
It's tough when you got to run a company and make a movie.
Like he's doing all sorts of other things. I'm doing all sorts of other things. I've got at least fires that need to be put out, and people are coming to me and expecting some kind of answers. And at the same time, I can't just be, not paying any attention to them at all and just sitting there, inking my pages or something. I gotta look up
and then you waste an hour on an interview show.
Yeah. It's easy enough to do, to just sit down and piss away an hour or two. You look up and it's like, God dang, I don't even know these guys.
Well, you do now.
Well.
And you're welcome anytime on the show, anytime you want something to say. That way, it's not on paper. Nobody can misconstrue anything. You can just come on here and say it.
It's tough though, because even with some of the stuff, people will go, "Was that for real?" And it's like, "No, I'm bullshitting you. You didn't get that." It's kind of hard to get that across sometimes,
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, I'll do what I can."
Well, we're going to let you go so you can get back to that she-dragon, and but we want to thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, it easy.
Eric.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay. It's a good interview.
That was a very good interview.
Yeah, he's cool.
See?
He's a real cool guy.
Come on.
It was a lot of fun.
Hey, I just said I didn't particularly care for his artwork. I didn't say he was a bad guy.
I've never been a big fan of his artwork either, but I mean...
Sounds like he's not a big fan of his artwork.
Oh, he wouldn't even hire himself.
Well, he said earlier.
Earlier, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I enjoyed his stuff on Amazing. It wasn't bad, but it's just not my thing. And I've read Savage Dragon when it first came out, and
so did I.
I joined.
Oh, yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
I entered my, one of my characters into the contest when he was doing that contest in the beginning, and of course, then I stopped reading it when he picked Lobster Man or whatever the hell it was. But it just wasn't my cup of tea. I have nothing against him. I truly give him all the respect in the world for what he's accomplished with. Still doing the same book and still doing it well.
And working himself into a position of
being the publisher
right.
for Image Comics. I mean, it says a lot. So
personally, he's one of my guilty pleasures.
Yeah, you say that a lot. Yeah.
And although after the first 10 issues of Savage Dragon or whatever, I stopped buying just because I had to cut back, and it was the mid '90s, and I kind of almost phased out of comics for a while. But someday I do have the ambition of buying the trades and reading Savage Dragon in the trade format. And I'm thinking, maybe I'll get lucky and find them in a 50% off bin at a show or something. No offense, I have so much stuff to read, and
Sure.
but I do
some issues.
Yeah, I know it's like 125 or 130 issues.
Well, he
something.
said he's waiting for 122 to come out.
Okay, yeah. So
And that's always one of those books that you always read, like the industry people. They say, what are you reading? What book are you reading? And to a one, I would always see Savage Dragon. I like what Erik Larsen's doing. And I've tried it now and again, and it's all right. Again, it's nothing to get me to keep buying it every week, but every month I should say. But so it's he always had that respect of some of his peers. I will say. I know there's others out there who'd rather kick him in the balls and talk to him, and look at him. But it was nice to get a lot of opinions, which I thought was interesting. A lot of things to say, and a lot of. That's why I kind of tried to get him to say, well, you're the publisher of Image. What are you doing to try to implement some of those things you're talking about? And he just was saying.
I can understand the predicament he's in.
Oh yeah.
With the different, but because unfortunately, Image is the kind of company that
can't do this.
They're the ones who should be doing it the most to get more exposure.
Yeah, but they could. That's the whole thing. They could pick and choose which ones they wanted. Because they could put, like, in a Barnes and Noble or a Borders, I could see Walking Dead. I could see anything the Luna Brothers are doing. I could see them trying even the Buzzard one he was talking about, and just putting a couple issues in in a chain like that. And I would think they could probably find an audience there, or even if they put it right next to where they have their trades, put those where they have the trades. I would think somebody might find it and maybe pick up on it.
I think the book market is too easy, though. When he's talking about newspapers and newsstands, you're not going to see Walking Dead, like at a newsstand.
Yeah, but you also say like you take what Palisade said about trying to put Muppets or Sesame Street in stores. They offer it to everybody, and it's up to those people to take it.
Oh, sure.
So no matter what some company might do, they just might have a hard time getting anybody to recognize that they are a prominent force in the industry. Whereas, I know Batman, I know Spider-Man, they'll be in the store. But there's these good books too that are made for an adult crowd that you're serving with your coffee house and all, and you're not doing it, and you should. But it's ultimately up to the retailer to decide want to do it or not.
Because those are the characters that need to be out there. Superman, Batman, right. Spider. Those are the ones that if we're ever going to lead they're going to lead the way to getting back into newsstands, getting kids, that could get into newspapers, and you would think that because DC is owned by Warner Brothers and Marvel has been saying that they're back into the black now, that they could spend a little money and get, instead of doing a booth at one of the conventions, take a booth to one of your premiere movie of Batman Begins, and set up a DC booth there.
But then you can't cut Marvel's booth back too much more.
Yeah, it'd be a speck on the floor. But yeah, it's. Plus, he also has the other thing, which I never even really thought about, the whole creator-owned thing that goes on at Image. You can't. It would be kind of cool though if they could get like 5 writers with the intention of doing one of those, saying,
like
"Look,
an anthology.
Yeah, you're all going to split this. You're all going to come up with new stuff. Not that it's their, that it's Walking Dead and Godland and all that. It's totally new stuff. That would be kind of interesting. But then again, you have these people who butt up against anything new. They see something new and they're like, well, I don't want to try it because I got to buy my 5th Batman miniseries and my 7th X-Men series. That it takes up shelf space.
Well, and I can't tell you how useless I feel that having a lunchbox, a lunchbox for everything, a yo-yo for everything, a piece of clothing, a hanky, a hat, a pair of underwear for every licensed movie that's ever been out there, and you can't even get the book that's related to that movie or topic out there for people to see. All they see is, I saw that commercial on TV, there's a toy. Okay, great. Well, what about the rest of it that started it all? You got to get that out there.
Yeah, like Marvel is on the right track by including a comic with the Marvel Legends figures, but put one in the box of Spider-Man's car or what, all that stuff, and the Halloween costumes that kids are buying now by the truckload. Even if it's a black and white reprint. Just throw one. How expensive is it?
It was even great when they were putting it in with I just lost my train of thought. They were throwing it in with something. Oh, the preview magazine. Their little preview magazine. That was great to get an issue of that because that sparked me to read some things that I wouldn't read, and now they've totally gone by the wayside of that.
Does Walmart still have like those packed baggies? They have like a baggies.
Once
of like
in a
4 or
while
5.
you see
Yeah,
'em.
and Toys R Us has the same thing. Once in a blue moon. Target tried it with a lot of the Ultimate lines where they had oversized versions of collected trades, like 3-4 issue things that actually are now on clearance for like $2. So I picked up a bunch of them for the kids, but that didn't seem to work out either. But again, I would find it like stuffed behind something on a side cap where it should be more prominent, right with the toy, right in the aisle, and it's not.
You know what? We talk about Borders and Barnes and Nobles and these bookstores, but really the one that I remember that always had a spinner rack was Walden Books.
Yeah.
Always.
And the one over here does.
And
but
near the cash register.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like tucked. Yeah, which is great. So if a small chain like Walden Books, it's not a huge thing. Like I assume it's not huge. Like
well,
Barnes and
it's
Noble.
part of
Barnes and Noble.
Borders.
Or
It's part of
Borders.
Now, or has it always been, or is it just
now?
But
well?
And it was B. Dalton that's part of
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble or
Yep.
something.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
But I mean, as a kid, I don't think they were right. They weren't under the whole, or were they back
No.
in the '80s?
No,
And
I
they
don't
had
think
it back then. You know, if you didn't get it at your comic store, you went to Walden
Yeah.
Books or
Well, and
the newsstand. But
if you go to Barnes and Noble, you might see 3 comics. Where you go to Borders, there's a whole spinner rack. So
Right.
even that is a
Right.
difference in the theology there.
And I understand what he was saying about the returnability and all that, because I know that hurts a lot. But that's why I say you only pick and choose a few titles. You don't put the entire Image banner out there, because you're right, they aren't going to sell. But pick and choose some that you want to try to boost, or Invincibles, something that's very kid friendly, family friendly, and go with that.
The trades are always a good thing to get into bookstores. That I think that's a lot easier than trying to actually get individual comics.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly why I am completely convinced that some sort of compendium by at least the big 2 publishers needs to be in a trade paperback format that comes out every month, so that people who are used to buying trades in Borders and Barnes and Noble can get some kind of a regular monthly thing that will encourage them to then visit a comic book store and buy some monthly comics, or at least expand their comic reading horizons. I don't, and even Eric said, in Japan, I mean, everything is weekly and cheap reprints or whatever, cheap. So freaking somebody do it. Wouldn't it be great to once a month get some book from Marvel or DC maybe that had 5 comics in it. It was like $4 because it was real thin paper, black and white or whatever. And every month it would be 4 different or 5 different comics. It wouldn't always be JLA and Green Arrow, whatever. It would be something different. And you just read like, oh, here's an issue of Manhunter. I have no idea what happened before. I'm going to check it out. It's super cheap. How can I say no? Who's not going to buy 5 comics for $4?
Well, they do it for foreign copies. I mean, they do that
Yeah.
same exact
Exactly.
thing for foreign copies. I mean, I wish
It's
We
the mentality here. It's the collector mentality
that's what I was going to
here.
say. Yeah, I wish we had. I mean, we have to have at least one listener out in Japan. I mean, come on, somebody out there, tell us what.
And then send us some funky sushi comics or whatever.
Well, my wife works with somebody whose husband is a flight attendant. I'm going to now ask him, hey, you see something, pick me up some of this stuff because you're over there once a week.
I want to know what's lost in our mindset over here that we moved away from picture books. I just because obviously we read them as kids, and everybody reads the comics and newspapers. So it's like what.
And that's where it's stuck. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's stuck in that that image of it's just a kid's medium.
Right.
It's just when I tell people what I collect and what I do, some people understand. Some people give you that look like comic books. I mean, my parents. I've told the story before. My father, when I started collecting comics seriously after high school, I was just looking for something to do. I had a job. I was looking for a hobby. Scott, my friend, was into comics, so I started getting into them. And I know my parents were like, "You're wasting your money," until I turned around and sold like 10 comics for over $100. And then they were like, oh, maybe you know what you're talking about. Maybe you know what you're doing. And it's still just that, stop reading those comics. It's just so ingrained in the American icon and the American thinking that it's very tough to overcome.
Well, and it's been stated a few times from different people as well that the United States is still one of the last countries in the whole world that view comics as a lower form of literature. I mean, everywhere in Europe and other places, comic stories and artwork are revered just as well as your novels and everything else that's published, and they're respected as well as. But for some reason, the mentality in the United States, everybody thinks comics, it's comics.
And you know what makes me laugh? All these people who watch football
Or soap operas.
No. Stick with football. Uniforms, mascots, characters, fighting, trying to win, every day, week in, week out. It's team versus team. What is more comic books than football? I mean, I know I'm stretching it, but really,
NFL
if you
Super
talk,
Pro.
yeah, if you talk about
cheerleaders, girls in skimpy outfits and big boobs, you know.
So I mean, everything is there. It just the mindset is if you think about it, is really the same.
That's right.
Well, and I mean, and you just
they're
all
modern
you have to
day gods if you want to think.
All you have to do is look at the success of the big movies with Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and
Somebody's
everything.
watching them,
right? I mean, and those are not just the people who are reading comics; those are mainstream adults, Americans who are going and saying, "Wow, Spider-Man kicks ass."
Yeah,
buy a comic book.
Well, and you look at all the people that do watch sports and wear all the sports paraphernalia. You know, I have a sweatshirt or something.
and they laugh at Star Trek geeks going to
exactly. And there was once upon a
conventions.
time where I thought, maybe when I was younger and going through whole finding yourself, what you should wear, trying to fit in type mentality as a young teenager. And I was almost afraid to do that at times. But now I look at them like, well, shit, these people look like idiots, man. I'm going to pimp myself out with what I like and screw it because it doesn't matter. It's what I like.
And another thing he was saying about putting comics into mainstream magazines and so on and so forth. I just got the latest issue of Playboy magazine, and I saw on the front cover it said Harvey Pekar. So I was like, ooh, I want to see this interview with Harvey Pekar, see what he has to say. Open it up here. It's a 2-page comic book spread of just Harvey Pekar telling a story about. It's basically looks like a commercial for his book Quitter from DC Vertigo,
right.
But still, right there, boom. And he didn't draw it; it was Dean Hapsel drew it. But still, a comic book right there in the middle of Playboy magazine, like he was saying. Put where to put comics and stuff like that to get other people to read. Somebody reads that, and they may think, hey, I'm gonna go pick that book up, and then they go into a comic book store, boom.
Well, and it's such a shame advertising is at such a level where it is so expensive to get anything on TV. Can you think like the Sci-Fi Channel just had a zombie thing, or it's coming up where it was 2 Night of the Living Dead movies back to back. Can you imagine like a Walking Dead commercial just thrown in there, couple seconds just to let them know it's out there, and that's it. You got all the fans right there watching it already. How mindless is that to do? But advertising is so expensive. You can't do it half the time.
There's something to say about just exposing people to. I mean, look at all the emails we get to all the people who say, I'm back reading comics after 10, 15 years, and all we're doing is talking. We're not even. You can't see the damn thing. You can't read it. We're just talking and suggesting and recommending. It's not even that. It's just I don't know. There's no answer.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, Tom sent us another movie news.
Yay!
Cool.
So we'll check that out.
We got 6 minutes of deadline, Jonah. We need page 1.
Everybody loves a hero.
Golly, Miss Lane, how come you get all great stories?
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
Good reporter doesn't get great stories, Jimmy.
Robbie, there's your page 1.
Good reporter
Makes them great.
Don't be writing this stuff in the newspaper.
Hi, I'm Tom Martnick, and here is Movie News. The big news this week is that actress Kirsten Dunst has confirmed that the villains for the next Spider-Man film will in fact be Sandman, Venom, and Hobgoblin. According to a source at freezedrivemovies.com, the costume designs for the new villains are a disaster. Venom's suit is tinted purple, and the Hobgoblin looks like a, quote, skateboarder or something.
Vampire Anatomy 101. Crosses and running water don't do dick, so forget what you've seen in the movies.
Fearless vampire hunter Blade is heading for the small screen. Sci-Fi Wire reports that David Goyer is currently working on a 1-hour pilot for Spike TV. The network has ordered 13 episodes, and no word yet on who will be playing the lead role. Could a sequel to Constantine be in the works? The producers of the first film insist that although nothing is currently planned, they had such a good time making the film and they love the character, and looks like we'll just have to wait and see. The original film has grossed over $230 million worldwide, and the star Keanu Reeves said he would have no problem reprising the role. Warner Brothers is starting production on the $60 million budgeted Frank Miller graphic novel 300. It's being reported that the film will be shot almost entirely in front of green screens, much the same way that Sin City was. The film's a ferocious spear-slashing story about 300 Spartans who fought to the death against an overwhelming force of invading Persians. The studio says they want to remain true to Miller's dark and violent renderings while bringing the book to life, and that pretty much guarantees an R rating. Finally, the cast and crew of Superman Returns have themselves returned to Sydney, Australia after a 5-week hiatus. The Daily Telegraph is reporting that the crew will spend the last 4 weeks of production time on one major sequence. Well, that's it for this edition of Movie News. Now back to the Geeks.
He didn't announce that. He was saying that Blade. They're going to choose a new Blade. It's me. I didn't want to announce anything, but since he let it out,
They didn't say gay Blade. They just said Blade.
Is he
All right, Matt.
Is he Puerto Rican vampire slayer?
Yeah.
I'd like to see.
How many Puerto Ricans you know that don't carry a blade?
Oh my!
Or have a cross.
And don't have a cross. You were born to be a vampire hunter.
Even though I don't have a blade or a cross.
I kind of wish Alex was here to hear that. I'm sure he knows about it, but just to hear his reaction, that's his joygasm right there, man.
What, the 300?
Yeah.
He should go be one of the 300.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's got to be R. Good Lord, they were naked for most of the time. Crime and ass.
I'm thinking NC-17.
Plus, I mean, the whole battle itself. I mean, everything that transpired. It was not let's shoot him up kind of thing. I mean, this is freaking brutal as it gets.
It's like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. I mean, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it right. So.
It could have been a musical though.
A couple dance numbers.
With a hack here and a slash there.
They made Lord of the Rings a musical over in London. I hope to God it doesn't come over here. Jesus.
That's terrible. That's a crime.
I was actually happy to hear about possible Constantine second movie. I really enjoyed that first one.
Yeah, I did.
You don't like it?
I liked it.
I can't get over the fact that Keanu Reeves keeps getting work. I don't get it. I mean, he sucks. I can't stand him as an actor. He doesn't do anything. I watched Constantine and I didn't dislike it, but he added nothing to that role. And there's so many things that he missed in playing that character that could have done something. I mean, just with the whole coughing and the cigarettes thing. I mean, it's like halfway through the movie, all of a sudden he's coughing up a lung, but yet he's supposed to have been doing it since the beginning of the movie, and and this is supposed to be affecting him physically, but not, it's like he doesn't even cough until like halfway through the movie. It's like, oh, now I got this huge problem. It's like, that's part of the character. I mean, that's something that you should be.
And I put that blame more on the director and the producer and whoever decided that they needed it to be
that's
American.
more as an actor doing his part in researching the character and playing the character. I mean, if that's going to be an integral part of the story, then that is something that's part of your character needs to be setting up and doing throughout the scene as it progresses into more of a health hazard and things of that nature. But
then you don't hire Keanu Reeves or something.
Well, exactly.
Like
so I mean,
Kenneth Branagh, he's somebody like that.
I'm not against another Constantine movie. I just can't.
I thought he said he didn't want to do another one.
That's what I thought too. So it's changing all the time.
Money.
Money.
And the same thing with the Spider-Man things. Don't take any of this for worth anything, because all this stuff now is what they're doing is they're utilizing the internet to throw curveballs and make everybody talk about it, but yet not still release the information, because they're role reversing exactly what happened when the first Spider-Man movie came out, where everybody's clamoring to get pictures, getting information, and putting it up on the web and ruining the story and stuff. So now they're feeding you stuff. They're intentionally doing this.
Sure.
What are you going to do if it is Sandman, Venom, and
I'm going to cry myself. God.
What are you
I it doesn't really bother me, because I look at it as Sandman is cool, and both Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi have expressed it numerous times that that's one of their favorite villains. So it wouldn't surprise me, and I actually look forward to that because I love Sandman as well.
But Venom.
Venom, I in a way, of course I'm kind of reserved, but in a way I look at it as, if Raimi does it, I look at it as he would probably do it as like a, like looking at a dark version of Spider-Man. That it's not going to be the whole tongue licking, I want to eat your brains bullshit. It's going to be something intelligent and well done. I think you're going to see it's going to be, and I think that's how he's going to present it if it is done that way, that it's going to be a dark version of Spider-Man, that it's him facing a dark version of himself in a way. And I think it's kind of cool that if it is Topher Grace, that he kind of looks like him. So it is kind of, you can play on that aspect of it. And I kind of think it would be done well. I think they'd be foolish not to, Sam has already set up the whole thing with Harry. And I think it's cool that they would do Hobgoblin rather than have him be the Green Goblin too. But if they haven't learned from the first movie with the goddamn costume, then somebody's not listening or paying attention.
I think it's safe to assume that nobody learns from anything because,
just
after
never
Batman
know.
and Robin,
Yeah,
we still
you just
get
never
some
know.
funky things, and we still get Catwoman, and we still get whatever else. You know what I mean? So,
but
they don't learn.
I give Raimi, the faith. He's done what he's done so far, and I'm not apprehensive, even though that Venom's not one of my favorite villains. But if he's in there, which I inevitably he's gonna be, you have to because he's such a fan. Followed, there's such a following for that character that they'd be foolish not to capitalize on that attention.
So you're saying you think they're going to keep him like thin? It's not going to be this big hulking.
Well, that's the way
Venom
he should be.
type thing.
If you look at like when John Romita Jr. drew Venom in his Spider-Man books, he wasn't this huge hulking, brutish.
Mm-hmm.
He was sleek, not as sleek as Peter Parker, but he was kind of sleek, and even when McFarlane drew him originally, of course he drew Eddie Brock more muscular because he worked out and did more things like that. But he was never this like 7 foot tall, huge. When I saw those miniseries like where he was going up against a juggernaut and stuff, it's like, no way. It's just character is not. He's not 8-10 foot tall. He's not huge. The symbiote does not add mass to your body and such. It's just a coating. It's just a costume around you that has, an essence, a personality and also a life to itself. So I don't fear Sam Raimi doing Venom in a Spider-Man movie. Because I feel it'll be done in not the same fashion as what we're used to seeing Venom as over and watered down in the comics. So. And the Hobgoblin, I just think, will be a cool aspect of it, and to me, it's a nod because it's a nod to the comics. Everything he's done so far has been a nod to the, to the Stan Lee, John Romita, Steve Ditko books. He's pulled aspects out of those things, so to me, it's natural progression, and I love the whole Norman and Harry Osborn thing. Because that was a great thing to experience while you were reading as it was coming out, in the monthlies.
Yeah.
I always
Too
just
bad Mary Jane's a dog.
I know.
I have
they so need Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan. They need her.
I always have a gut reaction just hearing Venom. No, I'm going to cry. I think you don't need that, but I agree that he is such a fan favorite. But
yeah,
I hope not.
Like I said, I don't deny the fact that he will probably appear in some movie at some point. Whether or not he's in this one, I don't know. Because again, I don't think. Sam's going to put 3-4 villains in a movie. I don't think Sam didn't. They talked about doing that in the first one. Originally, it was Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus in the first movie, and Sam's like, "No, you can't do that because it's just too much." And then the same thing with the second movie. They didn't put more than one villain in it. I think it'd be cool to start out and have a nice opening action sequence where he's fighting like the Shocker or something like that. That'd be kind of cool, But or the Vulture or something. It'd be kind of interesting just to throw that in there. But to be a key player in that movie or that plot line, I don't see. And I think with Venom, it's not something you're just going to pump into a movie. You already have the storyline going with Harry, so that has to progress. That has to continue. But it's not like
screw that.
It's not like
that's like having the Joker back. Fuck it, I don't want to see it. Move on.
It's like you don't put, you're not going to bring Venom in and just all of a sudden splash him in the movie. There has to be something going on there. So I don't know if I think more this would be like a build-up. Like this might be, he might appear as a character and you might see it unfold in this movie, and then him be like maybe a major player in the next movie or something like that. But I don't know. But that's my thoughts on it.
I think this is like our all swearing episode. It just seems everybody's swearing.
Well, no.
Hell damn fart. Okay, now I swear.
All right, now we got to go. To send us an email, please do so, comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. Visit our website, www.comicgeekspeak.com. Big thanks to Bob at gamecircuit.net for hosting our show files. And a big thanks to UpAllNightGaming.com for hosting the website. Please vote for us at Podcast Alley and subscribe to us using iTunes. And if you would like to buy a t-shirt, they're $10. That includes shipping. As always, we're brought to you in conjunction with WorldFamousComics.com, and we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time. See you next time.
Bye.